Bruce Lee is most certainly one of the most charismatic and emblematic icons of the martial arts, and one who has been able to breathe new life into the ancestral art of Kung Fu. Thanks to him, this martial art has been extremely popularized and many young people have discovered a vocation by watching one of his wonderful films. Having become world famous, the world had come to believe that Bruce Lee was definitely invincible, and surely immortal, or at least with 9 lives like the cat he seemed to imitate in his many fights. It was therefore almost a planetary shock when the announcement of his death was pronounced publicly by the medical examiner, on July 20, 1973, from cerebral edema. However, this official version has long been decried, and many conspiracy theories have emerged. And if some of them are wacky and highly unlikely, others have the merit of digging deeper into Bruce's life, to support the facts with real arguments. So, make yourself comfortable, because today we are going to discover the sad truth behind Bruce Lee's tragic death. Let's get started. To try to shed light on the tragic end of one of the greatest fighters of modern times, we should first of all look back at his eventful life and his incredible destiny. Bruce Lee was born on November 27, 1940, in the Chinatown district of San Francisco in the United States, and as an ultimate omen, the year of birth of the man who would later be nicknamed the Little Dragon, corresponded to the year of the dragon in the Chinese calendar. His young parents gave him the name Li Jun-fan, but the doctor who had given birth to him at the Chinese hospital in San Francisco would have decided, for reasons that are beyond reason, to give him the name Bruce, a Scandinavian first name far removed from his Asian origins. Although born in the United States, Bruce Lee will grow up in Hong Kong, his second homeland, and the cradle of his parents, and it is there that he will be initiated to martial arts. Having started practicing Tai Chi Chuan, which he found too soft for his taste, little Bruce, then 13 years old, wanted to take it to the next level by initiating himself to Kung Fu Wushu, one of the most powerful and secret martial arts. Curiously, Bruce Lee had no trouble finding a teacher, and not the least, since it was the legendary Ip Man himself who took him under his wing and taught him the basics of Wing Chun, an ancestral martial art originating in southern China and intended for close combat. Under the aegis of Ip Man, Bruce Lee will become a formidable bare-handed fighter but also an undisputed master in the handling of weapons, such as the famous nunchaku, which will later become his emblematic weapon. Thus, and before reaching the age of 19, Bruce will have learned thousand-year-old fighting techniques that gave him incredible strength and power, and which he did not hesitate to use in his many street fights. This was one of the reasons why his parents sent him back to America, precisely to get him far enough away from Hong Kong, which had become a real thug's hideout as the city was more and more taken over by the Chinese triads, who ruled there. At this point in history, it is essential to tell you a little more about the history of the triads because Bruce Lee's destiny will be intimately linked to them. Far from being heir to secret societies, the origin of the triad goes back to the end of the 17th century and was founded by monks from Shaolin Monastery and fervent opponents of the Qing dynasty then in power. After the destruction of their famous temple, the survivors became fugitives, condemned to live in hiding under false identities to blend in with the population. As in all secret societies, they developed mechanisms to demonstrate proof of membership by developing coded language, ceremonial rites, and other special signs of recognition. One of these signs is still done today in many kung fu schools, the closed fist with the open palm or by surrounding the fist with the other hand representing the 4 lakes and the 5 oceans, a symbol of fidelity to the Ming. However, the fighting disciplines inherited from the Founding Fathers, which were extremely powerful and dangerous, remained jealously guarded. These secret societies thus occupied a preponderant place in the political and economic life of the Middle Kingdom, before being outlawed by the new communist government of the People's Republic of China, which of course did not want to share power with anyone. They then found refuge in Hong Kong, Macau or Taiwan, and formed triads in 1949, although these triads are only a pale reflection of their glorious past. Most of them focused on organized crime, to the detriment of their political objectives supported by their nobler ideals of yesteryear. For several decades, Hong Kong's film industry was one of the 3 largest in the world and the triads were deeply embedded in this great economic field. Their influence manifested itself at all levels including the choice of script, actors, and contracts, and the vast majority of the films of the 70s and 80s were still about the history of Kung Fu, sometimes against a backdrop of rebellion, revenge or betrayal. Before continuing, it's time to answer the question of the day, and today it's about general culture. Bruce Lee is undeniably one of the greatest kung fu masters of modern times, but what is the name of the martial art he developed himself? Is it? Option A, the Street Kune Do. Option B, Jeet Kune Do. Option C, the Air Kune Do. Think carefully and write what you think is the right answer in the comments. Answer just before the end of the video. After his return from the United States, where he had been able to break through and popularize kung fu in the Western world, Bruce Lee became an important pivot of the great Hong Kong film machine. Thanks to him, the film industry experienced a great expansion that generated considerable profits, which of course was a great deal for the triads. However, Bruce Lee's unorthodox approach was a major irritant to traditional and conservative martial artists who wanted to keep their science secret, even though the Little Dragon had opened a kung fu school in America and was teaching techniques that had long been kept secret. This earned to Bruce the visceral hatred of the triads, who took his casual and, according to them, disrespectful attitude towards traditions for high treason, almost punishable by death. The Little Dragon was indeed threatened with body elimination very shortly before his death, and many of his friends were later able to testify to his growing anxiety as if he felt constantly threatened. Bruce Lee was, in fact, experiencing such a psychosis that, for example, he would lie on the floor when a door slammed shut, believing that the noise came from a gun. The truth is that the Little Dragon, although he wanted to appear serene in public, had taken the threats of the triads very seriously, and he knew that his life was hanging by a thread. On July 20, 1973, on leaving the set of the film Game of Death, Bruce Lee went to the apartment of his mistress, the actress Betty Ting Pei. The sequel is known and is now part of history. Bruce, complaining of migraines, swallowed a pill of Equagesic, a powerful analgesic, and in the late afternoon, the star will fall into a deep sleep from which he will unfortunately never emerge again. Among the actress's statements is a mention that Bruce had a fight before entering the apartment. He then received a blow to the head which would explain his pain and his taking of medication. The official cause of death was cerebral edema due to an allergic reaction to an analgesic, a rare case of hypersensitivity to equates. The report of the medical examiner who performed the autopsy of Bruce Lee's body will proclaim that the brain of the star had swollen like a sponge. Yet this official thesis was not to calm the minds of millions of bereaved fans, for whom a legend such as Bruce Lee, reputed invincible and with 9 lives, could not die from a simple allergy to a painkiller. For many, there was no doubt that Bruce Lee was finally, cowardly murdered by the triads, and his murder concealed in an accident. An anonymous phone call had been made to reporters to warn them that the star was dying and that someone named the Evil Cat would be responsible. Rumors in the martial arts community also spoke of a fight between Bruce Lee and a mysterious kung fu grand master. During this epic fight, the famous actor was allegedly hit in the head and his opponent told him that his job was done and that Bruce had very little time left. In the milieu, several people claimed that a Grand Master designated under the pseudonym of Evil Cat was the head of the Triad's Red Staff Department and that it had been decided to settle the problem by way of the martial way. The latter would have applied one of the most secret and deadly techniques in the history of martial arts, whose origin could be traced back to the Shaolin monks of the Great Temple, the Dim Mak, or the Touch of Death. This ancestral method had the power to provoke the death, immediate or delayed in time, of the opponent from a simple pressure exerted on a vital point. There is no scientific or historical evidence to attest to the reality of these legendary techniques. However, studies were conducted during the Second World War by the government of the Empire of Japan. This government gathered the so-called secret archives of a large number of dojos and martial arts schools and identified the vital points that were effective in combat for military purposes, which effectively translates into the undeniable effectiveness of this technique on the battlefield. Bruce Lee would thus have been a victim of the terrible Dim Mak, or lethal touch, and his death would, therefore, have nothing to do with an allergic reaction to an analgesic drug. Far from the official thesis, therefore, the Little Dragon would have been a victim of the triads, who would have ordered his assassination and who would have slyly disguised it as a banal cerebrovascular accident. And if we believe the rumors, it will also be the triads who will be at the origin of the accidental death of Brandon Lee, Bruce's young son, who died 20 years later on the set of one of his films, The Crow. Brandon Lee will, unfortunately, be mortally wounded by a residue of a real bullet, whereas the gun used on the set was only loaded with blanks. Some voices were raised to claim the possibility of revenge by the Chinese Triad Mafia because Brandon Lee wanted to investigate the death of his illustrious father and said he knew who was responsible. Unfortunately, the mystery surrounding the death of the Flaming Dragon will always remain opaque to this day, and for lack of evidence, the Triads have never been worried by the police or the justice system. The official thesis remains drug intoxication, but perhaps one day the truth will come out and the assassins of the Flaming Dragon will be held accountable until one day there will be real evidence to prove the conspiracy's supporters right. So, what do you think of Bruce Lee's tragic demise and the mysteries surrounding his death? Give us your thoughts in the comments. Otherwise, it is indeed Jeet Kune Do, the martial art invented by Bruce, and which was considered as the ancestor of MMA, since it was an intelligent synthesis of several fighting styles, to become almost unbeatable. I hope that many of you have found the answer. And if you liked the video, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, to subscribe, and share it with your friends. Same time tomorrow, the same channel for a new video.